on the contrary, what's a digital prototype? Well, it's what it sounds like. It's a digital prototype. But really, a prototype um, is something that's fast to create, it's fast to iterate on, and it's asset light. So a prototype is not your finished version, right? It's not something you're shipping to the public. It's typically for internal use. It's typically for proving out an idea. Uh, it's for that proof of concept, right? So when you look at this, like this test footage from Overwatch, for example, um, uh, let's see. When you look at this early test footage from Overwatch, you can already tell which character this is potentially. You can maybe even tell what map this is. Um, uh, I haven't played Overwatch in like 8 years, and I can tell what map and what character this is just right off the bat. Uh, and even if they're relying on just like super simple line traces like they are here, you can even tell how that translates to this character here. And if you can't tell, this is supposed to be Tracer. So playing as Tracer here in this space, um, you have your health, your ammo demonstrated on screen. You have the dual pistol setup, which is your left hand and your right hand out at all times. And then when you shoot, you see these lines come out from where the bullets are going to shoot. We'll be doing something similar in class today. Um, and then you can see it's dealing some kind of damage. And so this would be the second evolution of it. I don't know if they put a date on this one. Yeah. So this is September 2013 versus November 2013, right? Uh, and so this is just, with some animations, slightly more polish, and they're actually proving out these mechanics in the actual playable space that they intend. So, and yeah, like you'll notice as they iterate more, now you have an actual health bar. They have particle effects showcasing where the bullets are shooting out of. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is this, right? This is going to tell you if your game's actually fun, right? It's going to tell you if your mechanics are actually working. And it's also going to give you an idea of the scope of the game. So very early on, you can start to put this together, and you can really see how uh, one, how much work something's going to take, but also just how all these systems overlap and how you can start to construct things, right? So again, it brings me back to uh, my point. This got all tiny. Thank you, Google Slides. It brings me back to it's fast to create, it's fast to iterate on, and it's asset light. A lot of people think you need animations when you're starting off. In fact, the common crux that most people fall into is they start with animations first, and there can be reasons when you need to do that. If you're making a first-person melee combat game, it might be appropriate to have some animations in there at the beginning. That being said, I still don't believe that version one of your prototype should be a ton of animations, right? Because you need to just make sure that like a jab works first before you go, oh, well, I'm going to get the jab and the hook and the uppercut and, all this stuff, because you'll kind of go crazy. And if you can't get the jab feeling good, well, the rest of it doesn't matter, because then players aren't able to make meaningful choice, right? So how in depth should a prototype be? Well, again, it's really just as deep as it needs to be. But um, yeah, I think I put an example here of like, if you want to prototype a fishing mechanic, do you really need all of the animations of the fish, or can the fish just kind of like be floating in the water? It could just be a cube in the water, and you click and it shoots out a line, and if it hits that cube, then that cube starts to like gravitate towards you, right? And that would communicate ultimately what you need. It wouldn't look pretty. It wouldn't be like, you know, it wouldn't evoke all the challenge you're maybe going for, but it would absolutely tell you what you need about your project. Okay, so that's a little bit of the thinking behind prototyping. So let's actually kind of go in the engine and start putting some of this stuff together to kind of see how it comes together. Okay, so let's talk about making a health bar. So making a health bar is just one of, it's probably the most common one that will come up when you're assembling your prototype, right? Some sort of health bar or representation of some data, right? And in the last class, we talked about creating a data set for various characters, right? We set up the systems, and now we want to kind of plug into the systems with our prototype, right? So how do we do that? Well, we need to use something that's called UMG. And people who are more familiar with Unreal in this class are going to be probably pretty familiar with what UMG is. But for those who aren't, UMG is just basically Unreal's really cool UI system, right? It's their system for being able to put together what's called widgets. And those widgets are things that you can apply Blueprint to, but also things that are going to render 2D elements on your screen. That being said, you can also use a widget in world in 3D, but we're just going to start with the 2D version of that. So in my blueprints folder, I'm going to go ahead and create a new one called widgets. I'm going to open this up. I'm going to right click again, go to blueprint class. Actually, there's an easier way to do this. I'm going to right click, go to user interface, and then widget blueprint. And then that's going to auto just take me to user widget. Okay, and we're going to call this BP underscore player HUD. Great. Okay, so before I go too far, this is the designer window in a widget. So if I go here, I'm going to quickly add what's called a canvas panel. That'll help you visualize it better. So if you add a canvas panel, that's basically going to give you a better idea of what elements are going to be your space that you can actually edit on and put 2D elements on. So I've added the canvas panel. You can go here to the palette, just type in canvas and just drag it onto your player HUD here. And that's going to do what you need. Okay, so now that we've added a canvas panel to our HUD, let's talk about some things before we go too far. So this is my canvas panel. Again, this is where anything that I add, i.e. like buttons or images or whatever, is going to appear on the player's screen. So let's look at some of the options that we have. So we have things like buttons, images, text, and progress bars, which that's the first one we're going to dive into, sliders, etc. So we have quite a few options here that are already built into Unreal and are already going to save us quite a bit of time there. They also have some nice things like blurs, which essentially is just like a Gaussian blur that you can put in your widget. And they have some things that are pretty cool for loading, like, for example, this sort of like spinning little throbbers, what it's called. It's a weird name. So, okay, now that we've kind of gone through that a little bit, let's also note that there's a graph in widgets, right? So just like how we have in our regular blueprints, we also have an event graph of sorts in our widget, but there's a few differences. So in a regular blueprint, we have the event begin play and the event tick. And we also have some other events that are specific to actors, right? So in actors, we have an ability to overlap an actor, right? We can't really overlap a widget because it's a 2D element that's rendering on your screen, right? So instead, we have construct, pre-construct, And we also have event tick here. Event tick works the same way. It's going to run every frame unless we change that, which I'm not going to go into here. We have event construct, and this basically, I won't say it's the same as begin play, but for our purposes in this class, pretty much, it's going to run when this widget is created, when it's constructed, right? And pre-construct is actually a little bit different because this is going to be called before the widget's constructed. And what do I mean by that? Well, this actually gets called in the editor. And there's all kinds of reasons why you might want to do that. But let's say I'm working on a main menu and I want to populate all of the buttons dynamically or something like that. So the pre-construct is going to be helpful because if I'm working on the menu and I don't know how much space the buttons are actually going to take up until they're populated, well, I would have to play the game every single time in order to see that, because I would need the code to run in order to do that. But if I want to make edits in advance before I even hit play, well, the pre-construct is going to allow me to view that here in this window, in the designer window. Because again, it runs in the editor itself. So we probably won't end up doing anything pre-construct in any of these lessons, but again, there's some definite reasons why you might want to. So if anyone ever has any questions about that, feel free to let me know. Last note on that, it can also be really needed if you have, say, a lot of text and you need to ensure that, say, like a scroll bar works, or that you actually can hold all of that information in your designer window, right? And sometimes that text might get set, in the middle of the game. Okay, so the graph, pre-construct and construct. And tick. So let's talk a little bit about what the event graph does versus what bindings do. So I'm going to actually start with this health bar. So I'm going to take this progress bar. I'm going to drag this in. Usually you would want to make this like super duper precise, but for our purposes, I'm just going to kind of make this here and just roughly line it up with some of the grid. Come on. It's close enough. Okay, so this is a progress bar, and a progress bar in Unreal Sense is basically just something that can fill up from 0 to 1. So in our case, you can see if I change the percent value here in the details panel, if I change that from 0 to 1, it'll fill up. So we can actually leverage this and use this to do something like a health bar, a stamina bar, etc. So we want this to start at 1, right? And basically this is one of the reasons why having your health be a whole number at the beginning can be important, because you want to be able to round your number up to whatever is 100%, right? And we'll talk a little bit about the math in a bit. But for now, we're just going to start this at 1. So think of this as 100%, basically. Again, it goes from 0 to 1. So we have this to 1. And we're going to want to take this, and I'm just going to change this color from blue to green. Cool. Just because, I don't know, health feels green to me. Unless you're Dark Souls, then it's red. All right, so I've made this green, and let's talk about actually like setting this value and kind of changing the percentage based on what our actual player's health value is. So if you remember last class, we actually set up our current health. Oh gosh, is it blueprint? No, yeah, right. First person blueprints, first person character. Okay. So we already set up our current health. And if we go here into our begin play, you'll notice we're playing as Nadira. I'm actually going to just set myself back to Cameron because that's, I think, the more straightforward one. And that's going to set our current health and our speed, our character name, etc., all from the very beginning. And so it sets all that stuff. And then we have a current health value that we can read from a variety of places. So that's kind of exactly what we want to do, is we want to be able to read our current health value and translate that into a number here. So let's do that. So let's click on this. Let's go to %. We're going to go to create binding. On the right, there's a little button that says bind. Click on that and create binding. Okay. And what this is it is literally just like manually setting this number. So if I were to set this to 0.5, then if I were to play the game, you would see that the value is 0.5 because the binding is telling it what value to be. And now bindings are going to run also, they're going to be updated all the time, right? So you don't have to worry about this value ever falling out of place. But obviously 0.5 is a hard set number. We don't want to do that. So we want to get a reference to our character and to pass the current health of the character into this return node. So let's go back to our event graph. And we're going to do a call. And I have some problems with the get all actors of class call. There are some reasons why this is not a very optimized call, but it's one that's really helpful for prototyping because it's really fast and it's going to kind of get you what you need pretty immediately. So I'm going to show it in this class, but again, know that there are some optimization concerns and you probably don't want to ship with this. But again, I think it's helpful when you're prototyping. So get all actors of class, and we want to get our first person character. And we'll do get, which is going to get the first version it finds of that character. And then we're going to set this. So I'm going to right click on this and do promote to variable. And that means that we're going to have a variable for the first person character. So that means we have a reference to our first person character, right? So I go from get all actors of class, and then I set that character there. Okay. So why would I do that? Why would I care to have a reference to the character? Well, when I go to get %, now what I can do is I can drag in. I can do get my character. And I can actually just do get current health. Bada boom. And that's going to already kind of get us the value that we need to plug in. But there are all kinds of problems with this, and maybe you've already thought of a few, which is that if you remember, our player health that we set in character data is like 500 or like 1,000 or like 750, right? And these values don't really work well with the constraints of the progress bar, because if you remember, it goes from 0 to 1. That being said, 0 to 1 is not nearly enough space to do health scaling, right? And from a progression standpoint, it's not very helpful. So instead, I'm going to change these health values to better support this. And this would be a constraint, right? And we're going to adapt to said constraint. So now that we have these 3 characters, let's say that Cameron's going to start at 80 health. Amaya's actually just going to maintain her 1,000, which is going to be 100. And then Nadira will start at 90 health. Okay. And so now that we've kind of done that, there's still another problem, which is that this progress bar, again, goes from 0 to 1. It doesn't go from 0 to 100. So we need to do some math to clean that up. So the math here it's very simple. So we're just going to go ahead and divide this by 100. Right? Cool. And that's pretty much going to do what we need there.